Hello, 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 IBS party people. Today we are talking male hormones. Ladies, you can join us if you want, because guess what? You've got testosterone too. You just don't have as much as the bros in the house. So, Amy, first of all, hello.
Hello, how's it going?
Well, I'm good, but first I'm actually going to side tangent us for a second and just share. And again, those of you not on YouTube, you're going to miss out on the visual. So I had a laughable moment earlier today, which I haven't told you about yet. So in my building, I've got my office on the ground floor, but I don't have a restroom in my office. So I have to go upstairs to use the bathroom that's like as part of the upstairs suite. No big deal, whatever. Well, I was telling Amy earlier, I was working on some reels, and there was a reel that necessitated a scene in a bathroom. Well, of course, it happened to be a reel where I was wearing a wig, and I went up to film the 3-second of the reel in the bathroom, and I bumped into somebody. And they just, it was the lady who works upstairs. She was just like, oh, hi, but this is the wig.
Oh my gosh.
A very bright red wig.
It's like Ariel, like an Ariel wig.
Yeah, it's like an Ariel wig, honest to God. And I was thinking, I was like, all right, I'm going to run up and run down. Nobody's going to see me. No big deal. Like, it's a very small building. So the chances of bumping into somebody are fairly low. But of course, I bumped into somebody and she was very startled by my very bright red wig. But I think she was also trying to hide the fact that she was startled by it, which was great.
Right.
So
well, and
keep your eyes peeled.
What were you doing in the bathroom with the red wig?
I cannot reveal. You will have to follow @TriangleGuts on Instagram to find out more. I haven't posted the reel yet, but by the time this episode drops, I probably will have. So you will have to see in the coming weeks what that reel ends up being. I'll have to tag you when I post it.
An even better question is, did you tell her? If you want to know why I'm wearing this red wig, you can watch me at @TriangleGuts.
You know, I should have put that plug in. I could have gotten a subscriber right there. Yeah. I missed out on that.
You live and you learn.
I know. Well, I told her, because I felt very awkward in this bright red Ariel wig. So I did tell her, I was like, oh yeah, I was just up here filming an Instagram reel. And I was like, in the bathroom. Because then that feels really weird too. Like, to say that you're filming an Instagram reel is one thing, but doing it in the bathroom is it brings up a lot of questions for people who don't know my business very well.
Right.
So, and I just kind of awkwardly shuffled away and was like, weird day in the life. And then I ran away. Yeah. So, no.
Well,
I didn't tell her.
I'd like her to have something to ponder today.
Yes.
As to, I wonder what that lady that works downstairs with that bright red wig was doing in the bathroom. I'd like her to ponder that.
Yeah, like a little curiosity.
To ponder over. Yeah, you're building you're a redheaded woman of mystery.
Mystique, yes. I do what I can over here. I should just go to my Trader Joe's in Chapel Hill and just rock the Ariel wig and see what people say. Never know. Yeah. It's the month of Halloween when we're recording this, at least. So crazier things will be out in the world very, very soon. So, people in all sorts of costumes. So, I don't know. I would do it. I would do it on a dare. If you bribed me with something, like a big old piece of chocolate or something, I'd wear that wig anywhere you told me. I don't care. I don't embarrass easy anymore.
Yeah, I have a feeling that we both don't have high shame. In terms of, we don't have much shame when it comes to doing
Well, I don't anymore.
Things.
I was very easily embarrassed / mortified for probably most of my childhood, middle school, and then first part of high school. But at some point later on in high school, I was just like, you know what, screw it. Right. People already think I'm the quiet, tall weirdo who likes anime. So I might as well just be really outward with my weirdness. So, did I ever tell you this? And I swear to God, we're going to get to the topic at hand for the day. Did I ever tell you that I made a samurai costume?
I think you did tell me that.
With the pleated pants and everything. And I made a makeshift kind of kimono. And I just wore it to school one day. Not on Halloween. Not on school spirit day. Nothing like that. I just purely wore it to school for fun. And everybody in my class thought I was a total freak show. But like my 4 friends who loved anime as much as I did were like, this is so cool.
Oh
You're
my
amazing. Oh my God. And they thought it was great. And that's all that really mattered.
You were the hype girl for your whole group.
For real. For that day, certainly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The same year I was a ninja for Halloween, and that was pretty epic as well.
That
Like
is
a
pretty
ninja
epic.
from Naruto, to be clear. Not a normal textbook ninja, like a ninja from an anime show. For what
Yeah.
it's worth. Yeah.
Cool.
But anyway, well, speaking of ninjas, let's talk about male hormones, because I feel like the work that we do can kind of be like ninja-ing your health and figuring out and biohacking your health. So, would you like to start with a word to our dudes to lead us off?
Yes. Well, and last week, or I think it's the last episode we'll air, was about female hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about how females tend to have a higher incidence of IBS,
Mm-hmm.
and males have less of an incidence. And testosterone could be a factor in that,
Mm-hmm.
because it tends to help with motility. It helps with pain sensations. There's some research showing that it might actually help, like, blunt some of how stress affects the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of aspects where I think testosterone could be helpful from like a pain sensation, motility,
Mm-hmm.
general gut function
Yep.
standpoint. So, that might play into why men are a little bit less likely to have IBS related issues. But I also think that, there's interactions between the gut and testosterone levels, and then there's going to be interactions between testosterone and the gut. As we always talk,
Yeah.
everything's
Mm-hmm.
connected. So you want to support
Two
both
ways.
sides of the equation, because, there's also been studies that show endotoxemia and permeability of the gut. If you're leaking out endotoxins into the bloodstream from the gut, that can lead to lower testosterone levels too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think when it comes to hormones, even for the female hormones too, you want to be working on ways to help optimize hormones, from attacking it from more of a ways to optimize hormone standpoint, but also looking at it from a how do we make sure the gut environment is conducive to optimal hormones. So it's making sure you're addressing both sides of the equation and understanding what complexities there might be with both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
So
Like don't ignore one side of the equation. Like I would say if you don't have any sort of hormonal symptoms, I'm not one to go hunting for hormonal problems. Like if a woman
Right.
has a super regular period, it's not too heavy, she doesn't get a lot of wonky like PMS type symptoms or wicked cramps or anything like that, like I'm not going to go hunt for weird hormone stuff in somebody like that. And likewise with men, if you have a good libido, you can maintain an erection, like you're not having any sort of like emotional outbursts that would make us think that you have more estrogen than normal. If you don't have like metabolic syndrome or weight gain issues, I'm not necessarily going to go hunting for hormone problems in a man that doesn't have a lot of hormone dysfunction symptoms. But if you have any of those symptoms or even brain fog or fatigue, I think it's worth at least getting a glimpse at the hormone side of the picture. And like you kind of alluded to that we said last time, remember that all the hormones talk to all the other hormones. And all the hormones interact with every cell of your entire body. So, okay, we might be talking about testosterone, but what about insulin? If you have high insulin and you're insulin resistant because you're eating, I don't know, Pop-Tarts for every meal of the day, I don't know what you do. But like if you're eating a ton of refined junk and you're cranking up insulin like the Dickens, that's going to impact your testosterone and your estrogen levels. Or if you're a man and you're blatantly hypothyroid, that's going to impact testosterone function and vice versa. So like keep in mind that it's a very complicated web, but we're going to try to keep it linear and like focused in a structure that is easier to understand. But the reality of hormones is much more complicated than probably what we're going to paint today.
Right. And I think, too, what I was alluding to, of where you kind of want to support the hormonal side of the equation and then the gut side of the equation, is often because sometimes what I'm seeing in the functional space, and I might have talked about this last time, is like, okay, we have to address hormones first and then we address the gut. Like they want it to be a very linear process. And it's like, oh, you almost want to make sure if you're having hormonal issues that you're doing some stuff that would help the hormones, whether you supplement for a period of time with, you know, testosterone, or you do things that try to kind of regulate it, depending on what the scenario is. So you do things to try to support the hormone, whether that's like nutritionally, lifestyle-wise, to get the testosterone up. But you also want to work on the gut too, simultaneously. It doesn't necessarily have to be a linear, like the process doesn't have to be linear.
Like this and this.
Right. I find that sometimes there's a mentality that it has to be like linear, and I almost think sometimes that hurts the efficacy of both strategies if you're not somewhat supporting both.
Yeah. Well, I would say I think that a lot of people, like general kind of consumers, but also a lot of practitioners, really, 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 really fancy the idea of a protocol. Like, I cannot tell you, I mean, I think I've told you, but I had to unfollow all of the functional medicine groups that I was in and all of the nutrition related groups that I was in. And they were groups with healthcare professionals who were trained in functional medicine or nutrition, but I was losing my damn mind because so many people were going in there and saying, what's your best SIBO protocol? What's your best Candida protocol? What's your best protocol for low testosterone? And it's like, there shouldn't be, I know what they're getting at, but there shouldn't be such a thing as a protocol, because everybody with SIBO is different. Everybody with IBS is different. Every dude with low testosterone is going to be a bit different. So it depends on the case. But I do think that's where that comes from. Like the desire for like, okay, we do this first, then we do this, then we do this in this very linear, regimented kind of fashion. I think that that's a protocol at its finest. And like, I'm not saying that protocols can always be bad. Like, I mean, both of us have online courses and we go through it in a structured manner, right? Like you have material that you teach your students in week 1, and then you move on to whatever's in week 2, and then you move on to week 3 and so forth. And like, for me, I know I don't talk about hormones until I think it's week 9, maybe 8 or 9 of my 5-Map Freedom course, because I don't want people to put the cart before the horse and focus all their effort on hormones prematurely. But it's part of the conversation and it is folded into the mix. So like, it's not a bad thing to put one thing first and then the next in an effort to not overwhelm people. But again, like if you have more blatant symptoms of hormonal disruption, it might be worth your while to address both at the same time.
Right. No, I agree. And I unfortunately, we can have a process. So I feel like what we have is more of a process versus a protocol. Yeah. And I find protocols to me tend to be sort of like lazy medicine in a way, unfortunately, because they're not really trying to isolate the different factors. Like what you're saying, everyone with low testosterone could have totally different root causal mechanisms at play. So it's hard to, you know, have one protocol for each person. And, you know, so yeah, I'm in total agreement with you. I do think we want to look at individual factors and make the best decision. And in my course, the hormones are definitely in the later half. But I think you're right. If you're having blatantly, like if hormones are a big part of your symptom equation, it might be worth focusing a little bit more on that earlier on too.
And this could be one of the reasons why you're getting stuck. Assuming that the people listening to this podcast are stuck in some way in their healing journey. Like, I remember this one guy, for example, I forget how many rounds of, no, I'm getting two people mixed up. So he had never done rifaximin. He came in and he had some really, really intense symptoms. He had actually gone to the ER a whole bunch of times. They kind of shrugged. They didn't know what was going on with him. And he had been dealing with really bad GI issues for, I think, 1 or 2 years. And I was the one who identified the SIBO, actually. So he hadn't had the opportunity to do rifaximin. But he had been unwell, and he had been going to see GI doctors on and off during that 2-year span of time. And he'd gone to the ER a bunch of times. And not only did we identify, hey, you've got SIBO, and that's like kind of a big deal, but also I just did some blood work on him when he first started working with me, and he had blatantly low testosterone. And by that, I mean LabCorp flagged his value as low. When you get to the point where LabCorp is dinging you as high or low, or if Quest is dinging you for being high or low, you know stuff's weird. Because they don't give a rat's ass until it gets pretty bad. So the fact that he not only was low on testosterone, but it was low enough that LabCorp told him he was low, was like, whoa, ding, ding, ding. And sure enough, he had brain fog, fatigue, low libido. And that ended up being one of the things that really, really helped him. Like, yeah, I'm sure we did probiotics and prokinetics and nutritional work. But I remember, even in a short span of time, when I got him on some herbs and some DHEA to start raising his testosterone, within even 2 weeks, he was like, no, I'm feeling a lot better already. Like, he had better energy. He had better mental clarity. Like, he felt like he had energy to get through the day, and he felt like his gut was also at least moderately responsive to it at the time. And then we were able to kind of keep the momentum going as we layered in the other stuff that was more gut specific. But like, if I had only identified the SIBO with him, and I had not identified that hormone piece of the puzzle, we could have done antimicrobial after antimicrobial after antimicrobial. We could have done, all of these things, probiotics, whatever, and probably nothing would have stuck because he had this blatant hormonal issue, which was ultimately impacting his nervous system and therefore impacting his motility. And it's going to impair the ability to heal the gut lining. If you do have any sort of leaky gut, you need hormones to repair leaky gut. So like, everything kind of would have gone out the window if we hadn't addressed that piece of it in conjunction with the gut specific work. So that's just one example where I found this to be really helpful.
I think that's a great example of, again, how having like a support can help propel progress. I would say, similar to some of the female sex hormones, I find that my clients that have had lower testosterone, but not all of them, but I always want to rule out, are they getting enough nutrition? And as with all my SIBO and IBS clients, I want to make sure that
Amy, we know.
I know. I'm beating a dead horse. But testosterone, again, can certainly decrease pretty swiftly if you're not getting enough calories in.
Yeah.
So, and that, again, same thing with women. Our bodies don't really want us to reproduce if we don't have the resources to care and provide for a baby.
Which is good.
So it's a good
thing.
Yeah.
We, the whole world of like fertility is such a clusterfuck, to be honest. But there's all of this, we're so down on our bodies, and it's so like, bad body, bad. Why won't you let me reproduce? And it's like, your body's telling you something, man. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that to be a jerk. Like, I have a very dear friend right now who's going through IVF, and like, I've seen her struggle with it, but it's your body saying, we're not ready. We don't think this is safe. We don't think this is smart. If we try to carry a baby right now, it's not going to be a good situation. Or like with testosterone, maybe you're having difficulty achieving an erection, or maybe you don't have a sex drive because your body knows that right now you're inflamed, or the DNA that you would pass on is not going to be the utmost quality. So therefore, you might as well just keep your swimmers to yourself and not bother trying to reproduce right now and focus on the stuff that actually matters.
Right. Right. No, and I remember just before this, I was scrolling through stuff, and they pointed that out too. But in relation to how permeability and endotoxemia can reduce testosterone, because that stress of having, permeability in your body's basically getting the message like, I'm under attack.
Yeah.
And we need to attack this stuff. And testosterones actually can be pretty anti-inflammatory too.
Yeah.
So they were arguing in this article I was reading that, testosterone kind of is going to go down because they want the body to be able to mount an appropriate response to any sort of like infection or, attack.
That makes sense. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, I didn't think of it either. I was just kind of scrolling through and I was like, that's so interesting. But to me, again, it's still at its core the body trying to use resources in a more appropriate way. It sees that I have a threat here right now that I have to deal with, and I'm going to decrease testosterone for the time being. But if that stress becomes chronic, if you have chronic permeability, chronic gut issues, or chronic stress of some sort, it's going to kind of keep testosterone down more long term, which is not helpful.
Well, that's the thing, is that your body, I think that the body oftentimes responds in a way to A, protect you, and B, I think the body usually assumes that the threat or the stress is going to be short-lived. The body never intends to get you stuck in a rut where you have chronic leaky gut, endotoxemia, insulin resistance, low testosterone, all of this kind of crap that we're talking about that can build on each other. It's not the body's intent to get you stuck in that rut and keep you there for years and years and years, but the body probably throttled back on testosterone in order to mount an appropriate immune response, mount an appropriate inflammatory response, thinking, oh, we just need to take care of this today, and then on Tuesday we'll be back to normal. And our lives and our environments and our food oftentimes lead to more chronic issues rather than just like little one day, whoopsie daisy, okay, we took care of that kind of scenarios.
Yeah. And one sort of thing that I want to touch on, and it's a little bit of a sidebar, but I think it's good to bring up because you've alluded to it a little bit about, like our bodies are trying to protect us. And I feel like it's so important to have compassion for what your body's going through, and how you're speaking to your body can be so important. But just as a reminder, I know it's frustrating if you've been dealing with issues forever, but taking a moment to analyze and to reflect on how you're speaking to your body, like self-talk.
Absolutely.
I think can be really important when we're talking about some of these issues, especially if it comes to things like, if it's inhibiting fertility in some way, like that can get really stressful. And if you're just kind of stuck in a vicious cycle gut-wise, the worst thing we can do is be like, why is my body like this? It's my body hates working me, against me.
The bacteria are out to get me. Yeah. Well, it's like we've got to cut our bodies some slack.
Yeah.
And I would say our microbes. The microbes are not technically part of our body, but I think we need to cut them some slack oftentimes too. Like even with SIBO. SIBO makes perfect sense if you're a bacteria. You want to grow and reproduce closer to the food hole.
Right.
The small intestine is closer to the mouth. So, of course, the bacteria are going to try to creep up closer to the food hole. That's where the food comes. If you can do that, if you can move up the line at, the in and out or whatever, then you're going to outcompete all the suckers that are down the road, not even in the line yet. Like, I don't know, we're going to go with that metaphor and just run with it. But, like the bacteria that are closer to the food entrance are going to outcompete the suckers that are in like the distal colon. If you're a bacteria, you don't live in the distal colon. Like, there's nothing for you there. Come on.
Right. Well, it's so interesting too, because in just the mindset of how are you talking to your body. I posted something recently on Instagram. You posted on it, like, that you liked it, about how we should be balancing our SIBO life balance, or like kind of dealing with IBS in your life balance. How much does that consume your time and energy to go after IBS or go after SIBO? So like I was basically saying in this post that we all need to be cognizant and not let our pursuit of getting rid of SIBO or getting rid of IBS being the number one priority in our lives.
Yeah.
And I had, and again, like I don't fault them at all for commenting, but I had a few people, and I'm glad they did, that were like, oh, I can't do that because like I'm so symptomatic that I can't focus on anything else. And it's like, I totally feel for those individuals.
We've been there.
Right.
Like,
we've definitely been yes,
there.
we have definitely been there. And it's like, but I think like there's sometimes, and I can't even remember if it's that specific post, but just the way they're sort of the inflection and tone of how they're speaking about their bodies. To me, again, it seems more of a barrier of how they're interpreting the picture at this particular point in time and trying to find that balance and how to speak to their body and their kind of outlook, and not saying it all has to be rosy and positive all the time, but it can't all just be negative.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is like we're never saying that you need to just ignore your symptoms and eat whatever and like frolic through the rainbows even though you're going to poop your brains out. Like it's not like that, but you know, like we were talking on that thread when Amy talked about how she decided to make the time to play basketball even when her gut was really bad, and that brought her a lot of joy and probably was good for her vagus nerve. Like that's healing at its finest.
Right.
Like, did she feel 100%? No. Were you probably nervous that like you were going to have to run to the bathroom or something in the middle of playing basketball? I'm sure. But did it bring joy to your heart and get the oxytocin flowing and benefit your vagus nerve and therefore your motility and therefore your SIBO? Yeah, probably.
Right.
But like you have to pull yourself out of that sucky void of awfulness just enough to see that there's the possibility of doing something like that. And that's the hardest step, like pulling yourself out of that and acknowledging maybe I need to do this other stuff. That's the hardest step.
Right. I agree. It's such a switch flip. Like I remember specifically like the switch flip of getting completely consumed by the SIBO space and like I have to solve this problem before I can live my life versus I can work on this, but also still live my life. It's an interesting dynamic, and I think it can be tricky. I'm not saying it's easy, but
I think
again,
awareness and perspective is the first step. And again, and that's why we talk about stuff like this on the podcast, because sometimes it's just a matter of hearing it or hearing somebody's experience, somebody's story, and something can click in your brain and let you kind of open that door to that possibility. But if you don't know that that's a possibility, if you don't know it exists, then you're never going to do it. So we're just here to show you the possibilities that could be helpful, and they've been helpful for us. And we've seen it be helpful for our patients and clients and students, and just encourage you to love your body and cut it some slack, and love your microbes and cut them some slack. But none of them are out to get you. None of them hate you. It's just that they're acting in a way that you wouldn't choose. Right. They're acting in a way that your conscious brain would not choose at the moment. Right. That's the way to look at it. The rest of your nervous system, maybe. But we don't have very good understanding of the unconscious parts of our nervous system, at least from like a cognitive perspective. Right. But anyway, we're getting off on a tangent, though. Not that is uncommon for the IBS Freedom podcast, mind you.
You get what you get. You get what you get.
Yep. So let's circle back to testosterone for a moment. So we talked about this a little bit, but let's start with some symptoms of low testosterone. So I had mentioned low libido, difficulty holding an erection, brain fog, fatigue. Can you think of any other good ones? I feel like those are the kind of main four.
I think those are the main four. I sort of think of low testosterone as feeling pretty generally blah.
Yeah.
In a way, I also think One other aspect that can sometimes come up is just having like poor performance, like from an athletic standpoint. Like if you feel like
maybe
your
poor
stamina...
performance in other departments too.
Right, as that too, Nikki. So poor performance inside and outside the bedroom is a symptom of low T. But yeah, like athletic pursuits. So like if you typically could lift a certain amount of weight before and you're just like way off what you used to be able to do, or like you're feeling like you're not progressing as well as you should with certain like weight training and that sort of thing, low T could potentially be involved there too.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. And I'll add a couple more. I actually just looked up. I have a handy little spreadsheet here. Let's see. Decreased number of spontaneous morning erections can also be a symptom of low testosterone. I don't think I have that on my questionnaire. Maybe I should add it. Inability to concentrate, fatigue, depression, a lot of cognitive kind of stuff comes from low testosterone. Another one that I have listed here is muscle soreness. So again, I think that goes along with the decreased physical stamina and decreased athletic performance. But like if your muscles get way more sore than they historically have, then maybe that's a piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah. Or just like your recovery is really bad after working out.
Yeah. Did I ever tell you, here's a good way to think about testosterone. I don't know if I've shared this. I remember a patient that I worked with in Arizona when I lived there. He had low testosterone. That was the primary thing that he came in to work on. And of course it was like all the things that would cause low testosterone were going on.
Right.
Like he was, I think I met him at like a networking group. So he was an entrepreneur. He was a business owner. And he was driving all over Tarnation every day with like meetings or whatever. I forget if he was an investor or what he was. But he was constantly just on the go, burning himself into the ground, trying to run his business and get business for his business. And he was eating fast food for 2 meals a day, most days of the week. He was drinking alcohol excessively because he was probably like stressed AF.
Yeah.
He didn't exercise anymore because he felt like he didn't have time for exercise. He was overdoing it on sweets and like literal candy. Like he was munching on like Mike and Ike's or whatever it was in the car in between his meetings, driving all over, eating sugar. And, you know, it was like, and then I think on top of that, like his gut wasn't doing so great either. But we, you know, I looked at this and was like, okay, where do we even begin? Like, let's, you know, honestly, I'm like, okay, where do we have the ability to make some changes? Because if I told him to overhaul his entire life right now, he probably wouldn't be able to do that. But I think just we started with having him throttle back on the processed junk food, sugar, and throttling back a little bit on like the takeout kind of food, like the, you know, McDonald's, Burger King kind of food, at least a little bit. Like, okay, maybe swap it out for Chipotle or swap it out for something that's a little bit healthier. And then just had him starting exercise just like a couple times a week, weightlifting in particular. And you could do a weightlifting exercise or a workout in, I think, in less amount of time than it requires to do a good cardio workout. For me, if I'm doing cardio, I want to do like a good 45 minutes, depending on what it is. But if I'm weightlifting, I'm exhausted after like 25 minutes. So it's a little easier to fit in the schedule. But for him, those couple of changes made a really big impact. But to go back, one of the things that I'll never forget he told me about, he was doing testosterone injections at the time when we first started working together. He was going once a month and getting injections. And he didn't want to keep doing that. It was not a great thing to keep doing. It was a pain in the butt. But he was saying when he got the injection, he said he felt like his spidey sense came back. And I love the way he described that. But he was like, my spidey sense was back. Like I had energy and mental clarity and I could do all the things. Like I was getting work done. I was sharp as a whistle. I could exercise. I had energy. I had a good sex drive. But then gradually throughout the month, that benefit would start to peter out until like the last week of the month, he was dragging. He was exhausted. He was foggy. He couldn't concentrate. he had no sex drive. He didn't have energy to work out. He was like, bleh. And it was
Right.
like his spidey sense got sucked out of him. And then once a month it was getting injected back into him, and his brain lit up. And he came alive, quite frankly, right after that injection every month. But he knew that roller coaster was not sustainable, and he didn't want to keep doing
Mm.
that. But that kind of paints a picture of like,
Right.
you can see the really stark difference when you work with somebody who's been doing testosterone injections, because it's literally night and day different within
Mm.
a day or two of getting the injection. But
Yeah.
it's not a sustainable, holistic thing to do.
Right.
Like, nobody
Right.
wants to get an injection once a month for the rest of their life. That's not practical.
Right. Right. I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure too. We talked about different ways. You mentioned some things that could build up your testosterone, like strength training, weightlifting type things are going to be probably the most impactful movement that's
Yep.
going to increase
Yep.
increase your testosterone. Again, I think nutritionally, like getting enough calories and
Yep.
eating protein types of stuff, it can
Yep.
definitely help with testosterone. I think
And zinc.
certain
Making
zinc,
sure you
that's
have
what I
enough
was
zinc.
gonna, yeah, zinc I think can be important. I think, have you typically ever used, like, do you ever use adaptogens to help raise testosterone? Like, have you ever seen that? Or do you use any
Sometimes.
specific herbs?
Yeah, let me look at I'll actually tell you the particular blend that I had him on, because now I think that might be good for the conversation. Hold on. Da. So the answer is yes, first of all, but for the guy I referenced earlier, for example, I had him taking DHEA as a supplement
Yep.
because it's a more direct precursor for testosterone. So it's not testosterone itself, but it's the next best thing. So I
Right.
had him doing DHEA in the mornings. And then I did have him on a blend. It's what I used at the time for this guy that I felt was appropriate was Men's Adapt from the company Herbalist and Alchemist. So I didn't compound it. This actually was just something we bought from them. It has ashwagandha, an herb that I cannot pronounce and I won't even try, maca, red ginseng, aka Panax ginseng, and another herb that I'm not familiar with and I'm not going to try to pronounce. So ginseng and ashwagandha and maca, I know, are pretty well known for modulating or boosting testosterone in some way. The other herb that comes to mind is tribulus. That gets talked about a lot. I haven't honestly used tribulus very much in this capacity, in part because 90% of my patients are women, so I don't have occasion to raise testosterone that much. But tribulus has a reputation for increasing testosterone. Whether or not it's true, I can't really say. But I think, like, with that patient, again, like, or with the two people I referenced, like, exercise, especially higher intensity, like HIIT training, high intensity interval training, or weightlifting, or both. But if you've got to pick one, I would do weight training. Exercise is huge. Making sure that you're not over consuming processed sugar and junky empty carbs can be useful, because if insulin is too high because you're insulin resistant, that's going to convert your testosterone into estrogen and feed into that aromatase enzyme. So you can't be pumping yourself up with testosterone and then just sending all the testosterone down the chute to turn into estrogen. That doesn't work. So taking care of insulin resistance, if you have it, exercise, which is going to benefit insulin resistance in addition to the testosterone itself. Make sure you're getting protein, calories, zinc, and then some of these herbs or DHEA. And I mean, like, 95% of men with low testosterone would probably turn around miraculously with just the handful of things that I just listed.
Yeah, and I only to add a few others, like, that are just kind of basic that we've talked about a bunch, would just be making sure you're sleeping enough and making sure you're managing your stress. I mean, both of those are going to affect so many different aspects of function. So that's just something to think about too,
Yeah.
to just kind of take care of yourself from like a stress standpoint.
Yeah. It's holistic, right? All the body
Right.
parts are connected. And going back
Right.
to twofold with the stress and the sleep, remember that hormones talk to other hormones. And they're not choosy. Like, all the hormones talk to all the other
Right.
ones. Right? It's not an
They're
exclusive
not a
club.
clique.
They're not a clique. They all chit chat with each other. They're very cool that way. But cortisol, the so-called stress hormone, which also regulates blood sugar and is part of your circadian rhythm and sleep rhythm, cortisol sure as heck chit-chats with testosterone and estrogen all day. And keep in mind, too, that cortisol and the sex hormones are all made from the same stuff. They share all the same precursors. So, I have this great graphic that I show patients a lot of time that I call the big scary chart of hormones. But it's basically a pyramid. Up at the top of the pyramid is cholesterol. And then that gets turned into pregnenolone. And then we get a split where you could go one direction and start making all of your stress chemistry, like cortisol, cortisone sort of stuff. Or you could go the other direction and make testosterone and then estrogen. And if your body is stuck in fight or flight, or if you've had trauma, or if you have something that your body's perceiving as a threat, your body might be choosing to suck up all that substrate and shoot it down towards cortisol because it knows that you need the cortisol for survival and you do not need to have an erection to survive. Point blank. So it might be that your body is perceiving stress. Again, whether you're mentally perceiving stress is another thing, but your body might be perceiving that stress and sucking all of those resources down towards cortisol at the expense of your sex hormones, in which case you've got to go back to the stress and the sleep. I think that's actually a really excellent point.
Yeah. And I don't know if we're going to go into this in this episode or some potential experts we're hoping to get on, but like, what about when testosterone gets too high? Like, are we going to talk about that now? I don't know if we didn't really.
You mean
like
for women,
PCOS
I assume?
type? Yeah, for women. So like PCOS scenario.
I think that's very important to talk about, but let's save it for another episode, in part because we're calling this the male hormone episode, and I don't want the women to miss out on the conversation that we had in this one because they thought that it would pertain to them. But no, I think that's a very, very good conversation to have. And, honestly, women can have low testosterone also. Right. It's just, for women, it's usually going to be associated with low estrogen. Right. Because again, testosterone is a precursor for estrogen. And symptomatically, the biggest thing is going to be low sex drive for women. Our brains don't need as much testosterone flowing through them to function. We don't need it for cognitive kind of function nearly as much as men do. But similarly, if we become deficient in estrogen, we're going to feel it cognitively. Whereas a man who has low estrogen, whatever that might mean for a man, probably wouldn't feel as much of a difference cognitively. The male brain really is wired up to be very dependent on testosterone, and the female brain is wired up to be very dependent on estrogen.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's less of there's not really a cycle for men, so it's a little bit more simple.
They're simple creatures. You all of you men listening right now, you're simpletons. And I love you and I hate you at the same time. Because honestly, like,
tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, we were talking about this with the female hormone episode, right? Like, for women, it can take months and months and months to see a difference. With some herbs, like I know Vitex, a lot of experts say that you need to give Vitex 6 months to really work its magic before you judge whether or not it's working. Because we're intervening, and then we have to let multiple cycles run their course for the body to kind of get the memo that we're changing something. Versus with men, your rhythm is day to day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's your rhythm. So we could intervene. Theoretically, we could intervene on a Monday, and like 5 days later, you could be like, damn, I've got more testosterone. I feel great. And it's so deeply infuriating as a menstruating woman to see that, because like, it's wonderful because it clinically is very easy to work with. In my experience, I love getting low testosterone patients because then I'm like, I'm going to look like a superhero very quickly with a minimal amount of effort. Honest to God, it's great. But it also is deeply infuriating because I'm like, why can't women be this simple? Damn it.
Right.
So, it's tell you how you really feel. That's
Yeah.
had to get that off my chest. But you
I'm
all are
glad.
simpletons.
I'm glad we were able to get that all out in the open, out in the air.
It's a good thing that we're not bona fide famous yet, my darling. Yet, by the way, yet. Because otherwise I could picture if we had like 1 million views on this podcast, I would get all these like hate Twitter tweets saying like, Dr.
Right.
Dennis is a man hater. No, it's just I resent your simple hormones. I'm envious of your simple hormones, damn it. That's all there is to it.
Well, yeah. That's so funny.
We'll get there. We're gonna get
I actually really like when you get fired up. It's fun. Might not be fun for...
Did you ever watch Family Guy at all?
I have. It's been a while. I used to watch it growing up more so than I do now.
It makes me think of the segment with Peter where he's like pretending to be a newscaster and it's like, you know what grinds my gears? And then and there's like internet memes with that image all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like the mode I've lapsed into. You know what grinds my gears? Simple male hormones. Damn it. Why can't we have those hormones?
Right.
But I think I otherwise dig the female experience, but sometimes the instant gratification of male hormones is alluring, to say the least.
Yes. Yes.
Let me think of, I'm going to look at my notes really briefly here and just think of, was there anything else I wanted to mention? See, you all are simple enough creatures that we're running out of stuff to say already. Darn it all.
Let's see.
Let's take a moment to talk about aromatase inhibitors or aromatase just in general and that conversion into estrogen. Because I think, when you have low testosterone, the way to kind of work through a problem like this is to say, okay, do you have low testosterone because you're not producing enough or because you're losing it all? Like, the metaphor you could kind of use is, all right, your bucket is not full. Does that mean that the hose is not turned on strongly enough to fill up the bucket? Or do you have holes in the bucket? And we've largely, up until this point, we've talked about like getting the hose to produce more testosterone in this case. So getting your testes to produce the testosterone and making sure you have the fuel and the environment to produce testosterone. What about if a dude theoretically makes enough testosterone, but is shunting it towards estrogen because of aromatase activity? What are some tips and tricks for that? And this would present as like low or low normal testosterone with elevated estrogen on labs. So I'm curious if you have any tips or tricks. I mentioned one, but you can reiterate that if you want to start there, or we can go into other tools.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, I don't know if that would be like soy products. Is that something?
I don't think that does anything with aromatase that I'm aware of. Those soy has more of a rap for having selective estrogen receptor modulators.
Phytoestrogens and
the
stuff.
phytoestrogen stuff. So that would be a little different. No, so for aromatase, the numero uno is making sure you're not insulin resistant and you don't have boatloads of insulin hanging around. Because again, insulin is an aromatase stimulator or facilitator. So if you have lots and lots of insulin hanging around, you're going to be turning all of your lovely testosterone into estrogen. So, and like I've even heard some functional doctors who, are MDs or DOs, I've even heard of using prescription aromatase inhibitors to great effect for a period of a couple of months, just to kind of pump the brakes on that for the time being, while the person is getting other stuff on board. So there are prescriptions, but there are also natural aromatase inhibitors that you might layer in as part of what you're doing. Probably the best researched and the best well-known is resveratrol. Right. So I would, if you have that kind of presentation to your symptoms, if you're getting more emotional in the past and you're finding like you have some of the low testosterone symptoms, but you also are struggling with more of like an estrogenic kind of pattern to your symptoms, you might really consider ramping up quite a bit on resveratrol and getting that in your system. But I think ultimately just making sure that you're not loading up your body with tons and tons of carbs.
Right.
And
or
sugar. Not that carbs are evil.
Right,
To be clear.
balancing your plate properly.
Yeah,
So
carbs are
that
not
you're
evil. It's not that you all need to go keto or whatever it might be. It's just like, again, like the guy that I shared, he was eating like, I don't even know, you know, Starburst or something. I had to think that hard
Right.
to think of a candy, by the way. Because in my opinion, the only candy that matters is chocolate.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. When I was younger, I used to like Starburst and Jolly Ranchers. But now I'm like, no. If I'm going to eat something sweet, it is going to be chocolate, or so help me God, I'm going to find chocolate. I don't know. But that's, for my guy who is eating McDonald's or Burger King 2 meals a day, most days a week, and munching on gummy worms or whatever it was that he was munching on in his car just to keep his energy up to get through the day, we had to cut out some of the junky sugar. You can still eat rice and whole grains and whole grain bread and some pasta and some healthy carbs, but you've got to cut out some of the junk. And then because in honesty, I'm not somebody who proclaims to specialize in male hormones necessarily, partially because I'm not a dude, and it's less interesting to me.
Right.
I will just rattle off some other aromatase inhibitors from my notes that I have blatantly held up in front of my face. So I'm not even hiding the fact that I'm reading off of a list. So in addition to resveratrol, others that you might consider for aromatase inhibition from the natural world include chrysin, which actually I think I've used that as well. It's CHRYSIN. So chrysin, zinc in and of itself can inhibit aromatase. Flax seeds, stinging nettle, EGCG, that's the flavonoid in green tea, vitamin C, and then there's one that I cannot pronounce. It'll have to be a mystery. I don't know what to tell you. But also I have a note on here that the aromatase enzyme is also drastically upregulated by mold and mycotoxin exposure. So that's another thought, is as far as like the root causes go, is your root cause that you've been overdoing it on the peeps and the junky junk food for a long time? Is it because you've been zinc deficient? Maybe you've been a vegetarian or a vegan for a long time and you've been ragingly zinc deficient, lack of exercise. Is it because you're exposed to mold and you have like a mycotoxin burden that is too much for your body to handle? Is it because you're stressed out the wazoo or your circadian rhythm is shot? Another one worth mentioning that we haven't touched on is it is possible for men to have autoimmunity directly against their testes. That is a thing. And the only lab that I'm aware of that will test for that is Cyrex. It's spelled Cyrex. Yes. Cyrex Labs in Arizona. I forget which panel it is, but if you look, they have, it's one of their autoimmune panels. They have a marker for testicular autoimmunity and, for that matter, ovarian autoimmunity as well. It's in one of their like big mega panels. It's like $500. But again, like persistent low testosterone that is not responsive to all the stuff that we've talked about, and you just can't seem to get it up, pun totally intended, I would consider a workup for autoimmunity against the testes, especially too if the man also has other autoimmunity. Like I've worked with men who have Hashimoto's, ankylosing spondylitis is autoimmune, and that's much more common in men. Like if you are a man and you have diagnosed confirmed autoimmunity, then I would also be more on the hunt for that testicular autoimmunity, because then it might be that you need to get some testosterone pellets or injections or patches or cream or whatever it is. You might need to supplement a little bit just to get on top of everything you're dealing with. Bring the autoimmunity into control, heal up your gut enough that you can get in front of the autoimmunity, and then you can wean yourself off of the testosterone replacement. But if you have an autoimmune condition, it's kind of analogous to being a type 1 diabetic. Like, if you're a type 1 diabetic, you need the insulin. That's it. Just end of story. I don't know what to tell you. Unless you could grow a brand new pancreas, which I've never seen happen, at least in my clinical career, you might just need to replace, at least for a while, so you can get ahead of this And then you can start
Mhm.
making other progress, or you might just need long-term replacement, realistically, depending on the degree
Right.
of the autoimmunity. But that's worth considering as well. I'm glad I didn't forget that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you didn't either.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, I think that being said, we talked about testosterone production. We talked about holes in the bucket going down the chute to estrogen. We talked about exercise, lifestyle, nutrition, supplements and herbs. We talked about autoimmunity, mold, some of the root causes, but most likely most of it's going to be from overdoing the junky sugar and not exercising and not getting
Right.
enough of that kind of baseline support. But can you think of anything else? Any stone that is yet to be unturned in the world of low testosterone?
Nope.
I was
Not
going to
off the
say
top of my
crickets.
head.
All right. Well, that's good enough for me. Guys and gals, if you're listening, I knew it was going to be a simple episode because, again, you men are simpletons and I resent you and love you all at the same time. But honest to God, this is like everything from my brain that I could think of for low testosterone. Yeah. I think that is most everything I know about this topic. Run forth into the world, make you some testosterone, inhibit your production of estrogen, and go, have a nice erection. I don't know what to tell you. So we will talk next time on the IBS Freedom Podcast about something other than penises, and we will be right back here, same time, same place, to talk about that non-penis topic yet to be revealed. Amy, my darling, have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you then.